Alright, hello everybody. Today I'm starting something new. Um, we're going to be talking about uniting America, defining the problems. And the first problem we're going to begin with is reform the criminal justice system. So, let's think about this deeply, where we're at today with criminal justice system. We've incarcerated a lot of individuals, sent them to jail and prisons, and it just keeps happening. The law does not solve conflict. And that's one of the main issues about the criminal justice system in America in a lot of ways. It seems like we have no issue locking people up and basically throwing away the key and ignoring the problem. America ignores a lot of problems, and this is one example. I say we need to abolish the death penalty. Um, okay. Okay, so we are no longer under this eye for an eye of the Old Testament. Actually, technically, humanity should have never been under eye for an eye. And we need to learn how to embrace love and forgiveness and positivity. And you can't do that when you're stuck in hate, revenge, and fear. We need to get out of all this. And a lot of the reasons I'm talking about this is these are some of the things that the technocrats are going to come after. They're going to tell you, oh, they can make society better by basically chipping people and making them obey. That's not the route to go. We can evolve our consciousness without technocracy. And actually, humanity can achieve a much greater height than with technocracy. Technocracy is going to limit you. It may seem like it'll enhance you, but that comes at a price. And you can enhance your own consciousness a lot higher through evolving your consciousness than you can with technocracy. Technocracy is just a cheap way to bypass things, but then you become a slave to the machines and the technocrats. They own you. Okay, but technocracy is a whole different subject. So back to focusing on the criminal justice system. So let's think about the criminal justice system. So when thinking about the criminal justice system, people don't really go back far enough. Um, so let's talk about common law back in the 12th and 13th century. Now, one of the things that common law did was it took away local autonomy. What is local autonomy? Local autonomy is basically the jurisdiction within the local community. Because they know you best, and I think punishment would be more well suited, not technically punishment, because we're trying to get out of that framework, punishment and revenge. Because, I mean, that's what you're taught all your life. You do something wrong, like when you were a child, you do something wrong, then it is the responsibility of the parent to hurt the child. I mean, have you ever thought about that? Like spanking or taking things away from them. What did that ever really do? It just kept giving revenge and hatred. And why do you want to spark revenge and hatred in your children? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. And you think that's gonna discipline them, but all it does is teach fear and hate. And so you gotta learn to think a different way. You're bringing the criminal justice system into your household, just like organizations bring the criminal justice system um, into their workforce, because the whole conflict model is based on the criminal justice system, and unions use that to incorporate their punishment system. But common law took away local autonomy. So what does that mean? Well, see, you don't face the victim. Um, because when you go to court, it's always the state versus the defendant, which means that the crime that was committed wasn't committed against an individual, it was committed against the state. And therefore, the a victim of the crime isn't the victim of the crime because the victim is the state. No, the victim of the crime becomes a witness. That's all. And that's not how we should basically do things. Now, I would say there's a different route to take. Like, for non-violent offenses, I would say probation, and things of that nature. You know, you don't want the victim and the perpetrator to be talking in the beginning. The perpetrator should go through some classes. The victim should also go through some classes so that they don't have some kind of like post-traumatic stress from all this. Which, I mean, that could be the case, and they need counseling anyway. But the whole idea would be to separate them in the beginning, and then once through a process of counseling and therapy and things of that nature, there should be some kind of integration, and the victim and the person who committed the offense should be able to come to an agreed upon terms on how restitution could be offered. Doesn't necessarily mean that, and when we talk about restitution, we're not talking about like completely robbing people to where they don't have a life. Everything has to be done kind of like according to how they can pay them back, whether it's work for them, pay them back in small payments, or maybe an apology is all they want. That should be left up to the victim and the perpetrator, but it has to be clear that there's no feelings of revenge, guilt, and shame. And now all of those will be felt with at the beginning, and that's where counseling comes into play. Because you got to take care of both situations. You got to take care of the victim, and you got to transform the soul of the perpetrator. And that's what our criminal justice system does not do. It does not solve conflict. It locks conflict away, which harbors more resentment, and then it takes away people's jobs to where they can't produce a living, creating more criminal, creating a career criminal in the process. So we need to bring back more local autonomy and less actions by the state and the federal government, except in certain situations. I go with legalizing drugs. The drug war has failed. We've spent way too much money on it. And we should legalize drugs and maybe tax it. That all, I mean, yeah, definitely tax it. But, and definitely it should be regulated to some degree. And like appropriate things should be cut into it, because a lot of the reasons sometimes that people overdose on things is just out of the dealers cutting it with cheap shit, and basically, um, it could be mixing different drugs into it too, and that doesn't go very well or helpful. Um, Now, as far as violent offenders are concerned, this is something I'm gonna have to look very much into. Um, I would say violent offenders are multiple offenders. Um, the beginning. Now, I know what I may say. I'm just gonna kind of give an outline of what I think is a good idea. A little bit later on, I'm going to kind of like dissect that a little bit more to where it's more in a legal standpoint. But in order to change somebody, first you need to separate them. So first we got to get the violent offenders in some kind of like isolation. Now I know that it can't be like a 24-hour lockdown isolation. Um, so I mean they'll be able to choose whether they want to go out at certain times or whatnot. But the beginning, and they'll be sentenced to like a certain set amount of time, and the prison should have goals for reforming the individuals. But I think the best way to first start it out with would be isolation and with vibrational music and certain religious people coming around once a week or every few days, like a priest to do prayers or Buddhists to do meditation activities, or in some way we got to get them in touch with their soul because that's the connection that they lost. If you want a better society, you got to transform the criminal population or it's going to get out of control. And our justice system, our criminal justice system, fails to do that. As a matter of fact, it creates more violent offenders than anything. And it also creates racism because racism is I don't think it's as big of a problem with the left, but if you want to solve racism, then you got to solve the criminal justice system because when people do go to prison, it's kind of like they're forced to align with their race, and then that creates racism. It's probably one of the main root causes of racism is the prison system. And when I say this, I'm not talking about like certain races being prosecuted and sent to prison. I'm just talking about the prison system itself. Once you get in there, it's like, oh, you gotta pick your race. Because if you don't, then it's gonna be hard on you. Most of the time. It may also depend on where you're at. Um, so that's and then if they show progress, then they can be um after the whole vibration religious thing, and after they've done that, they can enter into more of a social community as long as they continue to um, uh, demonstrate good behavior. Violence will not be tolerated, to make that point clear. Um, and this is where also when they're in isolation, there'll also be like psychiatric evaluations and stuff like that to help them along on their way, and maybe some philosophical things. But once they're more in a better population and they're changing, they're getting along with people, then you transform them um, further with more religious activities, with farming and learning to grow things or building things. But like I said, violence is not tolerated. Um, because if occurs, then they're not reforming themselves. You got to get hatred out of your heart. And this is a good place to begin. Schools are another place to begin. And parental discipline is another place to begin. Um, but those are all conversations for different videos. Um, so I'm trying to think here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to add. Uh, Laws need to change. There's a lot of stupid laws on the books. I think every state and even the federal government need to go through laws and find the stupid laws and take those stupid laws out. Like there's some city in Arkansas where the bees aren't allowed to go down a certain street past like 5 p.m. Oh, what are the police going to do if a bee goes down a street after 5 p.m.? That certain street? Are they going to arrest the bee? Why is this law even there? So, you know, there needs to be research on why laws are there, certain laws, and if it's a wise idea to take those laws off the book. Um, because America has too many laws, and I guarantee people like break laws that they don't even know every single day. And it's intrusive as well because it gives the reason for the cops to just basically have an opportunity to violate your rights. And that's another thing that needs to change. There needs to be a higher standard for police violating people's rights. Because the cops do violate people's rights all the time. A lot of people just probably do not realize it. And I'm also open to more ideas on this. There's a lot of more research that I need to do on this before, like, I write a book trying to explain these concepts. But there's a lot of things that we do need to change between just about the overall picture of the criminal justice system. Because the Old Testament eye for an eye does not exist anymore. We need to move toward a more loving and forgiving stance because hatred, fear, and negativity hold America back, and all it does is create more fear, hatred, and negativity. And this is why the death penalty needs to be abolished. For one innocent person dying from the death penalty is too many lives, too many innocent lives lost. I mean, that should just not ever take place, and it already has taken place, so it needs to be chopped off the window. Like, no death penalty in America. I will not ever support the death penalty in America. I would rather support life in prison than that, because when somebody dies, their story ends. They have no chance to reform their soul, and I believe in reincarnation. So killing them right there is just not going to bring them back into a good environment. But if you can transform their soul while they're still alive, then what they do when they come back in their next life will expand and their consciousness and make them a better person overall. And that's one of my main goals, is because I believe we're all connected. We're all one. And when you kill somebody, I mean, it's like you're killing yourself. And I'm not a big believer in suicide. And I'm not a big believer of just killing people they have, because of difference. I'm also anti-war, you know. Um, it's something's got to change, or else we're heading down an extremely violent and wrong path. And if we don't learn to transform our consciousness and put effort into doing that, then you're going to create a reality that you do not like. And I'm trying my best to reach and warn people about this. But it's so hard because people want revenge. It's what they crave. It's what they grew up knowing. You only know what you're taught. And most people are not anonymous observers and uh, can try to find uh, they just repeat what they've been taught over and over and over again and just believe it's right. And when challenged, they get angry. They don't take time to think about it, to let their emotions settle. Um, Humanity is not evolving. It's devolution. Uh, and when I say devolution, I mean it in a biological sense, not a governmental sense. I think in a governmental sense, we need more devolution because that lessens the state government and strengthens more of the local government. And that's the now the founding fathers didn't do that. They wanted the states kind of pretty powerful. I think it would make more sense to make, when it comes to criminal matters, local government's more powerful. Um, State governments should probably be more concerned with more economies or violent crime. Local governments more concerned with non-violent crime, and the federal government, more concerned with crime that goes across the state lines. Um, but I'm gonna go ahead and leave it there. Um, but I think criminal justice reform, and in some manner the way how I described it, oh, I also think that any non-violent criminal, as long as they don't have repeat offenses, and the repeat offenses can be looked into, but I do think non-violent criminals should be let out on a parole status for a certain amount of time. Um, but but all of them, before they're let out, they should be evaluated psychologically, because being incarcerated has an effect on somebody, and you don't want to let somebody out if they're truly not ready to be out, unless their time is up. That's a different story. But if releasing somebody out on parole is either going to put themselves in danger or somebody else in danger, then they need a little bit more transformation time. Um, but I think those are some steps that we need to incorporate or start to pay forward. It's kind of just one of my ideas, and I'm just speaking about it. I haven't really defined my ideas. I'm just kind of voicing it right now. Um, but that's kind of like where I stand on that. We need to do something about this system because the current criminal justice system isn't working, and making it stricter is not the answer. It's just gonna make shit worse. Alright, I believe talking about this for about 25 minutes um, is good. Um, so, y'all have a wonderful day. If you want to comment about this, or if you have any ideas, or even if you disagree with me, feel free to comment and voice your opinion. I have no issue with that. Whether I choose to respond is up to me. But I'll probably like it or um, love it or give you the heart thing or I'll give you a thumbs up, one of the two. I might comment back. But other than that, we are out for today. And next week will be another bricks video. I think we're on the last paper for that. Because I definitely want to move on to something else. Oh, and a final thing. Alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana, where it is legal, should all be 18 years old. If you can vote and go to war, then you should be able to drink, smoke, or do marijuana where it's legal. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's just how I feel. On the same token, if you're going to keep it at the age of 21, then you need to bring the voting age up to 21. And make an adult being 21. Alright, well, and that, peace out. Bye. And this has been a Uniting America production.